Torian of the Swedish Broadcasting. In the lighter way here, you're now taking the trip of all trips of mankind. Can I ask each one of you, which place would you like to go to for a vacation when you come back to Earth?
Well, I think that the situation being what it is now, the place I would most like to go immediately is the Lunar Receiving Laboratory. If I'm able to go there, we will have succeeded.
I wondered if each of the three could tell us very briefly how your families have reacted to the fact that you're taking this historic mission.
Well, who wants to take a crack?
Well, I think my particular case, my family has had 5 years now to become accustomed to this eventuality, and over 6 months to face it quite closely. And I think they look on this as a tremendous challenge for me. They look upon it also as an invasion somewhat of their privacy and a removing of my presence away from the family for a considerable period of time. I'm not sure exactly whether this is the overriding feature over and above some of the other more pleasant aspects of the particular job that I have as far as it affects my family.
Neil, Marvin Miles, Los Angeles Times. I'd like to know, I understand that you're going to take manual control of the descent. Can you tell us at what point, how low you will take that control, how far you will burn down, and how low you could stage an abort and go to apps if necessary?
We have made some significant improvements in the flight control system and the computer's interaction with that system in recent months. Allows us to go into somewhat hybrid methods of manual and automatic. The predicted method at this point, although we have a great deal of flexibility and choice based on the situation at the time, would be to maintain manual control of attitude and automatic control of throttle through the final descent from an altitude of somewhere between 500 and 1,000 feet until such time as the automatic throttling rate of descent was unsatisfactory, at which time we'll go full manual on the throttle. That is, rate of descent command on the throttle, which is operating through the computer. Should that become unsatisfactory, then we can go to a full manual throttle, flying it in a manner like a normal VTOL machine would be flown. So 500 feet is a good...
That went down here.
James Burke, BBC. You have mentioned that your flight, like all others, contains very many risks. What, in view of that, will your plans be in the extremely unlikely event that the lunar module does not come up off the lunar surface?
Well, that's an unpleasant thing to think about. We've chosen not to think about that up to the present time. We don't think that's at all a likely situation. It's certainly a possible one. But at the present time, we're left without recourse at that account.
Colonel Aldrin, on Apollo 8, you were the command module pilot in the backup crew. And this one, you're the lunar module pilot. How interchangeable in your preparation for this, or for that matter in the flying of it, are the roles of the crew?
Well, at the stage that we're at right now, I think they're not very interchangeable. prior to my assignment as backup command module pilot on Apollo 8, we worked together as in slightly different roles, and it was, if I'm not mistaken, because Mike was dropped out of the mission that we had an adjustment of the crews that put me from the lunar module pilot into the command module pilot's position. For Apollo 8, there was no lunar module, so this was not much of an adjustment. It was just moving from an emphasis on systems to more in navigation. Now, since I had previous training to some degree in the lunar module, why then moving back into that position was not too difficult a task.
Have one on the far side.
Mr. Armstrong, earlier there was some concern expressed that you were rushed to get in all your training necessary for this flight. What is the state of your training readiness now?
The reason that was a concern is that the final training for a crew is the last thing that takes place. In other words, the procedures must be developed and the simulations completely set up and the simulators ready to fly and the checklists made and so on before the final training can take place. And these, of course, were the pacing items, these intermediate things to the final training. At this point in time, we have a high confidence level that the procedures and checklists, simulations that we are now operating are correct and will fly the mission the way they are now detailed. So, of course, there was a good deal of concern in our own minds and many other people in the organization that all these things for the descent, ascent, surface work would fall into place in time. We do feel at this point that we've been very fortunate in having those things make the schedule along with the hardware, which of course is on the pad now and ready to fly.
Shelton.
You were speaking a few minutes ago about naming the spacecraft Columbia and so on. Do you have any plans to name the site where you land? That is to say, the immediate area where you land. Will you give it any name or not?
As on previous flights, we, in the absence of official names for various locations and landmarks on the lunar surface, have chosen to use some unofficial names for our recognition purposes and for our training purposes. We'll continue to do that.
One more over here.
Mr. Armstrong, there's been some discussion of the possibility that with almost 10 hours interposed between the time of the landing and the scheduled moonwalk, that crew may become a little bit impatient and may start early. How do you now assess that situation?
Well, in the past, I guess, on our flights, we've demonstrated a somewhat more than average ability to change our mind and do things late or early or shift things around, maintain as much flexibility as possible. And I suppose that we would like to maintain that possibility now. Before the flight, we like to try to do just the opposite, get things set as firmly as possible in all our procedures and then attempt to stick with them. But should the circumstances at the time indicate that we can better achieve our objectives by using the information that we're gaining at the time we're doing things, then we'd certainly like to reserve that possibility, and I certainly wouldn't like to discount that this time.
One right here.
Jorge Ruiz Aguilar, Núcleo Radio 1000, México.
An item of unusual interest in the nearby area that would warrant inspection at the expense of other of our planned tasks, we would certainly want to retain the freedom to make that inspection, and within our ability to get to the location necessary to do that, why we would certainly like to. I can't at this time say what such an object might be, but if it were an animal, I'm quite sure we would zip over there and take a look. Or maybe we'd go the other way.
John Hebele, French TV News. This is a question for Buzz Aldrin. How can you figure out the chances of total success of moon landing and liftoff as far as LAM and all systems in the LAM are concerned?
I would figure the chances are quite high. To be more specific, I wouldn't have the first idea to go about really how to calculate these. I think the fact that we've had considerable success in our vehicles is indicative of what we hope will follow. We certainly have the utmost confidence of total success.
We have one in the front row here. One behind you. Back, second row.
I'd like to know what kind of surface do you expect on the moon? For example, color, the size of particles, or size of boulders, and so on. I'd like to know Mr. Armstrong's opinion and Mr. Aldrin's opinion, both.
Well, fortunately, we don't think we have to guess. I suspect we may be surprised in some detail, but the color is something that is predicted to be gray. Now, various crews in the past have called this bluish gray and brownish gray and greenish gray and maybe slight shades of tans and so on, but we suspect that those colors will manifest themselves in close inspection. The size of the particles will probably be largely very small, sandy, fine particles, but we do hope and expect to see some rock fragments. And I have no idea what size they might be, but we would anticipate that we'll have be able to bring samples back up to and including the size of a golf ball. Or maybe larger rocks in the vicinity, but we wouldn't expect to bring back large samples.
I think both the answers to your questions have pretty well been borne out by the surveyor program, indicating a very fine-grained, cohesive material with an abundance of varying sizes and varying shapes of harder rock material. And the colors, I'm sure, upon close inspection will be a little bit different, perhaps, than just plain gray. I'm sure there will be some definite color to the crystalline structures of the rocks.
I have a two-part question. One, have either any of you had any colds, sniffles, gastrointestinal upsets, or anything else in the past month? And two, are you carrying anything at all new or different in your medical kits this time?
I don't think we've had any illnesses in the crew. Can't say that we may not have individually had a sniffle or a stuffed up nose sometime in the past month or two. That may be the case. I don't know that I'm not sufficiently familiar with the medicines carried in 10 and 9 kits to say that there's anything different in ours. Does anybody know I don't think that there are. If there's any new differences, they're small ones.
The motion sickness pills have changed their chemical composition slightly. They used to be merazine, and now they're a combination of dexedrine and some other thing I can't recall the name of, but I'm sure the medics would be happy to provide you that information.
I'd like to ask Neil Armstrong if he agrees with a congressional mandate which specifies that the U.S. flag and only the U.S. flag be implanted on the moon on Apollo 11.
Well, I suspect that if we asked all the people in the audience and all of us up here, all of us would give different ideas on what they would like to take to the moon and think should be taken. Everyone within his own experience, and I don't think that there's any question about what our job is. Our job is to fly the spacecraft as best as we can, and we never would suggest that it was our responsibility to suggest what the United States posture on the moon would be, and I think that's probably within that decision has been made where it should be made, namely in the Congress of the country. I wouldn't presume to question it.
Ellis Swait, Beaumont Enterprise. On previous moon flights, astronauts have been pretty busy with such maneuvers as docking and rendezvousing, this sort of thing. I presume as rehearsal for this trip. Am I correct in assuming this time that your flight up will be relatively quiet?
I'm sorry, Did you catch that question? I'm sorry, I couldn't understand the question.
On previous moon flights, the astronauts have been busy with such maneuvers as docking and rendezvousing and this sort of thing. In rehearsal for this particular flight, will there be a minimum of that sort of thing on this flight?
Well, they're certainly equally important to this flight as they have been to all others. I think the only difference is that due to the work done on the previous flights, we probably did not need to concentrate so much on those phases in our training, nor will we be, should we be surprised if those activities go as we plan them to go.
Nick Chris with the Los Angeles Times. I know your main concern now is only getting to the moon and getting back, but I wonder if you could tell us just briefly what you think the role of the country's space program is going to be in the next few years, and what roles you would like to play in it. Where it's going, in other words, not after the next lunar shots, but 5, 10, 8 years from now.
That's a very big question, and the subject to which a good deal of attention has been directed in recent months, and part of our agency and Department of Defense and the Space Council and the administration and the Congress. And there's a very active interest by the people of the nation, too, in what direction this effort that has been mounted over the last decade shall be pointed. I wish that I could have had the time in recent months to listen to those discussions and participate in them. I suspect that many of you are much more up to date than we are in terms of those kinds of programs. I certainly think that the direction that we will go is beginning to gel. I see evidences at our level that people are beginning to home in on things that look practical, and I don't know what those agency and national decisions will be at this point, but certainly all the front runners, space station, the space shuttle, the lunar shuttle, advanced lunar exploration, and the early planetary explorations are the contenders to reckon with, and I certainly think that those will be the ones from which our early goals are selected.
Daily Mail, London. 2 questions. Firstly, what precautions have been taken at your own homes to prevent you catching germs from your own families? And secondly, is this the last period you'll spend at home here with your families?
Take back that, Mike.
My wife and children have signed a statement that they have no germs, and yes, this will be the last weekend that we'll be home with our family. So seriously, there are no special precautions being taken. I suppose if one of the kids came down with measles or some childhood disease which we had not had previously, then we would take measures to separate ourselves from them. However, in the absence of some overt evidence that they're ill, we are taking no precautions.
I have 2 questions. What do you anticipate will be the most difficult task that you have to perform during your walk on the moon? And second, what do you plan to do in your spare time when you're back in the LRL, when you're cooped up all this time, in between debriefings and business?
With regard to the first question, probably the most difficult part of the lunar surface work isn't on the surface, it's in the LEM cockpit. It's the preparation for the activities on the surface, and the work subsequent to the EVA when we again have to operate in a pressurized suit inside the lunar module cockpit. Those are certainly the most difficult, possibly the most tiring, and certainly the most potentially hazardous of the things that go on. Not generally recognized by the average bystander because it's difficult for those activities, those long preparation activities, to be adequately displayed to someone due to the close confines of the cockpit. But it's certainly, I think, one that we view with a good deal of caution, one part of the flight that we do with extreme care, and one that at this point in time we have high confidence in success of. Now, the second question with respect to the LRL, fortunately, I guess the activities will be very much like the activities subsequent to any other flight in terms of their mechanical detail. And it's post-flight schedule in terms of briefings, debriefings with various interested groups of the program will take place just as though they have on previous flights. The only difference will be that our communication will be via TV link and hired wire rather than face-to-face as we are here today.
I'd like to throw one point to the first question. Difficult things in EVA should be anticipated. We have attempted to anticipate all difficult things and to make them as easy as possible. I think the most critical portion of the EVA will be our ability to anticipate and to interpret things that appear not to be as we expected them to be. Because if we don't interpret them correctly, then they will become difficult.
Mr. Armstrong, at the time you step down on the moon, what will be your overriding consideration and what will be your main concern?
Well, immediately upon touchdown, our concern is the integrity of the lunar module itself. And probably wise to point out that immediately after touchdown, and as a matter of fact, for the first 2 hours after touchdown, we have a very busy time verifying the integrity of the lunar module and all its systems. Without that integrity, of course, we are unable to complete the remaining objectives, and we cannot safely continue with the lunar surface work, and we cannot safely, again, return to lunar orbit. So that, of course, is the most important thing, and it will evidence itself to you all here by a great deal of technical discussions about systems between the spacecraft and the ground during a time period when most people will be wondering, well, what does it look like out there, or what do you see? And we understand that desire for everyone to know those kinds of things that I'm sure we'll be eager to comment on, but reluctant to do so in the face of these more important considerations on which the success of the entire rest of the lunar mission depends.
11, Houston, Buzz, you still looking for that 90-degree bracket, over?
Yeah, he is looking for it now.
All right, we'll have a word for you in just a moment.
My monitor shows a pretty good clear picture from this angle. Now we found the 90-degree bracket.
Roger, Neil. It's really a super picture. We've got the ACA, your ACA, the good picture of the throttle, the 90-degree bracket. We see the start, your handles, and now over to the bracket.
That's about the position we'll be putting the camera in after the initial descent down the ladder. And it'll be taking 1 frame a second for most of the EVA.
Houston copies out. That's a real good view of that camera.
Our monitor is a little bit wavy, so it's hard for us to tell when we've got a steady picture for you.
11, we have no complaints at all. We don't see that waviness on our picture. It's just really great, over.
Do the edges of the window look like straight lines to you?
That's affirmative.
Okay, they don't in our monitor, and that leads us to make some corrections to the camera, which probably aren't required sometimes.
11, we have no complaints at all. It's a magnificent picture.
We've been receiving television now from the spacecraft for about an hour and 20 minutes. Apollo 11 presently 177,000 miles from Earth.
What was that, Buzz, you're chasing now?
That was me picking up some particles of paint that were floating through the air in front of the camera there.
Raj, Neil, we got it. There's us at Neil's about to check the Velcro map there. Okay, Buzz, we see the card up now.
Okay, for those of you that don't know, this is where we log most of our data for each of the LEM maneuvers. And we have another card like this, it's the timeline book, that we place down on the table in front of the data display keyboard. And it's on this timeline that we have all our procedures. We obviously have to hold these in place in 0G, so we make use of the Velcro patches on the back and on the table. So we can attach these down here. And then we just turn the pages over when we go to new sequences in our timeline of procedures.
Roger.
And we're ready to copy DOI patch.
Raj, we'll have the photos work that one up for you momentarily. Houston, that was a good shot of panel 2. Now we got panel 3 in view with the temp monitor switch. The stabilization and control panel we see now with the mode control switches. Now over to 11, that's real good camera work.
Probably the most unusual position a cameraman's ever hit, hanging by his toes from a tunnel and taking a picture upside down.
Roger, well, you're doing a super job. We got a good view of the cross pointer there. Had a good view of the tape meter.
We're giving you a picture now of the floor of the cabin. I think you can see the one of the two portable life support systems backpacks here in the center, and on each side we have the two helmet visors. I'll remove one of them and show you a little closer view of what this looks like.
Roger.
Inside the helmet visors are the EVA gloves with the blue tips. I'll not take those out now.
Roger, Buzz, that's a great shot now that we're getting of the helmet, the EVA visor, and also the EVA gloves in the background.
Okay, you did say this was going out now, didn't you?
Stand by, I think so. You got a pretty big audience. It's live in the U.S. It's going live to Japan, Western Europe, and much of South America. Everybody reports very good color. Appreciate the great show.
Roger, understand. Thank you.
Of your EVA advisor assembly. Appreciate it. Al, that's a good view of Mr. Collins down there. We finally see him again.
Hello there, Earthling.
Hello there. Hi, 11 Houston. We noticed when you were scanning over panels 2 a moment ago, 1 and 2, the 2 8-balls were slightly in disagreement. Control said he'd like Ags align there.
Yeah, one of them's Ags, one of them's Pings. The problem is we don't know whether to line Ags to Pings or Pings to Ags.
Stand by. 11, Chris said he can tell you.
We'll cage them both.
Right.
Strike all home week, Charlie, to get back in the lab again.
But I can imagine.
The traverse from the bottom of the LEM to the aft bulkhead of the command module must be about, 16, 20 feet. It's not a disorienting one at all, but it's most interesting to contemplate just pushing off from one and bounding on into the other vehicle all the way through the tunnel.
Raj, must be some experience. Is Collins going to go in and look around?
We're willing to let him go, but he hasn't come up with the price of the ticket yet.
Raj, I'd advise him to keep his hands off the switches.
If I can get him to keep your hands off my disc, it'll be a fair swap.
Roger.
That's why I've been eating so much today. I haven't had anything to do. He won't let me touch it anymore.
Raj.
It appears now that we have a view of Earth out the window.
Houston, if that's not the Earth, we're in trouble.
That's the Earth, and we have a very good view of it today. There are a few more cloud bands on than yesterday when we beamed down to you, but it's a beautiful sight.
And that description from Neil Armstrong.
We have some horizontal banding in our TV monitor. Are we transmitting that to you, or do you have a clear picture?
Neil, we have a very clear picture. The only thing that we see is a little white dot in the bottom of our screen, which is our TV guys say is an apparently a burned out spot in the camera, but it should come back. Over.
Roger. We have that in our monitor also.
Houston, we do have 3 lines across our TV. I thought it was just a transmission problem, but everybody's telling me now that it probably is on the downlink. Over.
Now, those are the same 3 ones that we have.
Okay.
How far out are we now, Charlie?
Stand by, I'll give you an exact figure.
You can notice the difference between yesterday and today. This is as large an image as we can give you.
Roger, it's distinctly smaller. You're now 177,000 miles out. Over.
That's nautical miles.
That's affirmative. 11 weeks. Go ahead, over. Houston, we see still see the banding along the intertropical convergence. I guess the most predominant one is around the equator, or slightly north of the equator.
Yeah, that's the way it looks, Charlie. Same as yesterday.
Right.
Keep the Pacific Ocean nice and clear and calm on splash day. That's all we had. And Charlie, I'd like to say hello to all my fellow scouts and scatters at Farragut State Park in Idaho. They're having a national jamboree there this week, and Apollo 11 like to send them best wishes.
Thank you, Apollo 11. I'm sure that if they didn't hear that, they will get the word through the news. Certainly appreciate that.
Huh? Houston, we have you, your sub-spacecraft point is just off the western coast of South America, directly south of about Mexico City, over. That looks like what we observed from here. And we're going to turn our TV monitor off now for a short bit while we have some other work to do. Apollo 11 signing off.
Roger, 11. Thank you very much. That was one of the greatest shows we've ever seen. We sure appreciate it. Over.